At 99 years old, when most legends are remembered through softened stories and polite applause, Mel Brooks does something almost unheard of. He stops protecting the myth and starts telling the truth. Not a scandal, not a confession, but the kind of truth that only comes when a man has lived long enough to outlast fear, ego, and expectation. Before the world knew him as a comedy giant, before laughter became his signature, Mel Brooks was simply a small boy trying to survive a world that gave him no guarantees. He was born Melvin Kaminsky on June 28, 1926, in Brooklyn, New York, into a working-class Jewish family during the Great Depression. Life was hard, money was scarce, and the stability was fragile. But nothing shaped him more than the loss that came almost immediately. When Mel was just 2 years old, his father died. That absence left a permanent mark, a quiet wound that never fully healed, but instead of breaking him, it sharpened him. From an early age, Mel learned that humor was more than entertainment. It was defense, it was survival, it was how a small, underestimated boy demanded dignity in a tough, unforgiving world. Brooklyn's streets were loud, crowded, and relentless, but they were also alive with culture. Mel absorbed everything around him: the rapid-fire timing of radio comedy, the exaggerated rhythms of vaudeville, the sharp, self-aware wit of Yiddish humor. Pain and laughter lived side by side, and he learned how to turn one into the other. Those influences fused into something rare, a style that was fearless, irreverent, and unapologetically bold. Comedy that didn't bow to power, but mocked it. Comedy that didn't hide from darkness, but dragged it into the light and laughed at it. After high school, Mel Brooks entered the U.S. Army during World War II, serving as a combat engineer in Europe. His job was to defuse landmines. One wrong step, and it was over. In the middle of war, he witnessed humanity at its most brutal and most absurd. And there, surrounded by destruction, he learned a truth that would define his life's work. Even tyranny can be ridiculed, especially tyranny. War taught him that false grandeur deserved no reverence, and that laughter could strip power from the most terrifying forces on earth. When he returned home, he carried those lessons with him. Determined to pursue comedy, Mel worked as a stand-up performer and writer, slowly carving his place in the industry. His breakthrough came in the 1950s when he joined legendary television programs like Your Show of Shows and Caesar's Hour. Inside those writers' rooms, surrounded by extraordinary talent, his instincts were sharpened. He learned discipline, structure, and the importance of character-driven humor. It was also during this period that Mel formed a creative partnership that would become legendary. Alongside Rob Reiner, he created The 2,000-Year-Old Man, a routine that blended ancient wisdom with modern absurdity, showcasing Mel's improvisational brilliance and unmistakable voice. By this point, one thing was clear. Mel Brooks wasn't just funny, he was becoming unstoppable. Mel Brooks' transition from television to film didn't just change his career, it changed American comedy forever. In 1967, he made his directorial debut with The Producers, a film so daring, so audacious, that many believed it would end his career before it truly began. The premise alone was shocking for its time: two men attempting to profit from a Broadway flop by deliberately staging the most offensive musical imaginable, Springtime for Hitler. But Mel Brooks was not glorifying hatred, he was dismantling it. By turning Nazis into objects of ridicule, he stripped them of power. He exposed the absurdity behind tyranny and fear, using laughter as a weapon sharp enough to cut through history's darkest symbols. Audiences didn't quite know what to do with it at first. The film was controversial, misunderstood, and divisive. And then slowly it was recognized for what it truly was. The Producers became a classic, earning Mel Brooks an Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay and announcing to the world that a new comedic voice had arrived, one that refused to play safe. The 1970s marked an explosion of creativity that few filmmakers in history have ever matched. One after another, Mel Brooks released films that would become permanent fixtures in comedy culture. Blazing Saddles took on racism and the mythology of the American Western with fearless satire and anarchic humor, daring audiences to laugh at truths they were often too uncomfortable to confront. That same year, Young Frankenstein proved that Brooks was more than a provocateur. It was a loving homage to classic horror cinema, meticulously crafted, visually precise, and deeply respectful of the genre it parodied. It revealed a filmmaker who understood cinema not just as a vehicle for jokes, but as an art form. With Silent Movie, Brooks paid tribute to early cinema and visual storytelling, while High Anxiety affectionately spoofed the suspense-filled world of Alfred Hitchcock. Each film demonstrated an increasingly sophisticated understanding of pacing, framing, and comic rhythm. Behind the outrageous jokes and slapstick moments was something deeper. Mel Brooks possessed a moral core. He never aimed his satire downward. His targets were always pretension, bigotry, and unchecked power. Laughter, to him, wasn't cruelty, it was correction. In films like History of the World Part 1 and Spaceballs, he lampooned historical epics and science fiction blockbusters not out of a cynicism, but out of genuine love for storytelling itself. He understood the rules of these genres so well that breaking them felt both joyful and precise. What truly set Mel Brooks apart from his contemporaries was his ability to balance chaos with warmth. His films were outrageous, but they were never empty. Beneath the jokes was empathy, and beneath the parody was respect for the audience's intelligence. And just when the world thought they had him figured out, Mel Brooks did something unexpected again. He proved that his creative instincts extended far beyond comedy. By the time Mel Brooks had secured his place as one of the most influential comedic filmmakers in history, he had already proven everything he needed to prove, and yet he was nowhere near finished. Behind the scenes, Brooks revealed another dimension of his creative power, one built not on jokes, but on instinct, taste, and courage. As a producer, he demonstrated a range that few expected, backing serious and emotionally demanding projects that stood in sharp contrast to his comedic image. Films like The Elephant Man and Francis showed that Brooks understood pain as deeply as he understood laughter. These were not commercial gambles. They were statements of artistic trust. At the same time, Brooks found a new stage for his voice, Broadway. In 2001, he reinvented The Producers as a musical, transforming what was once considered risky satire into a cultural phenomenon. The stage adaptation exploded in popularity, earning a record-breaking 12 Tony Awards and reintroducing Brooks' humor to an entirely new generation. It wasn't nostalgia, it was relevance. Proof that his instincts were timeless. The success didn't stop there. Young Frankenstein made its way to the stage as well, confirming that Brooks's comedic language translated effortlessly across mediums. Whether on film, television, or theater, his voice remained unmistakable. Throughout the 2000s, Mel Brooks became a familiar presence in popular culture. He appeared on iconic television shows like The Simpsons, Mad About You, and Curb Your Enthusiasm, often in brief roles that nonetheless left a lasting impression. Even in the seconds of screen time, he had the rare ability to steal scenes, reminding audiences that true comedic legends never lose their edge. His appearance on Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee offered something deeper insight. Behind the laughs was a mind that had spent decades studying timing, failure, and truth. He spoke not as a performer chasing relevance, but as a craftsman reflecting on a lifetime of creation. He continued delighting audiences with joyful cameos, including appearances in It's a Very Merry Muppet Christmas Movie, where his playful energy blended seamlessly with the mischievous spirit of the Muppets. These moments didn't feel like nostalgia, they felt like celebration. Even as age advanced, Mel Brooks refused to slow down. His voice remained sharp, his timing precise, and his enthusiasm undimmed. In 2015, he introduced a new generation to his talent by voicing the character of Vlad in Hotel Transylvania 2. Younger audiences, many encountering his work for the first time, were instantly drawn to the warmth and humor he brought to the role. He reprised the character again in Hotel Transylvania 3, Summer Vacation, proving once more that creativity does not expire with age. Across film, television, animation, and theater, Mel Brooks remained a living testament to the enduring power of laughter. But the most surprising chapter of his story was still ahead, because even at nearly a century old, Mel Brooks was not finished shaping the future. In June 2025, the entertainment world felt something rare, pure excitement mixed with disbelief. At an age when most careers exist only in retrospectives, Mel Brooks made an announcement that sent a jolt of nostalgia and anticipation across generations. Spaceballs 2 was officially in production, with plans aiming toward a 2027 release. The news instantly reignited the cult love surrounding the original film. For longtime fans, it felt like a homecoming, proof that the mischievous, fearless spirit behind one of comedy's most beloved parodies was still very much alive. Even decades after the original became a pop culture staple, Mel Brooks was once again shaping the future, not merely revisiting the past. As if that revelation weren't enough, the same month delivered another headline that reinforced his creative momentum. Brooks was announced as executive producer on Very Young Frankenstein, a new television project in development for FX. Inspired by one of his most cherished cinematic masterpieces, the series promised to bridge classic Brooks humor with contemporary storytelling, inviting new audiences into a world shaped by his unmistakable comedic DNA. Together, these announcements made June 2025 feel like a milestone, not a farewell tour, but a declaration. Mel Brooks was still here, still creating, still daring audiences to laugh. But behind the public triumphs was a deeply personal story that shaped the man as much as his art. In 1951, long before his legendary status was secure, Mel Brooks entered his first marriage with Florence Baum. During years marked by ambition, uncertainty, and relentless work, they built a family together. They welcomed 3 children, Stephanie, Nikki, and Eddie, who became the center of his life during a formative and demanding period. Though the marriage ended in 1962, those years grounded Brooks in fatherhood and responsibility, even as his creative voice was still finding its shape. 2 years later, in 1964, Mel Brooks found a partnership that would define the rest of his life. He married the immensely talented actress Anne Bancroft. What followed was not just a marriage, but one of Hollywood's most admired and intellectually rich unions. Their bond lasted more than 4 decades, until Bancroft's death in 2005. Together, they welcomed a son, Max Brooks, who would later build his own successful career as a writer, extending the family's creative legacy. Mel Brooks often spoke of Anne not only as his wife, but as his muse, his confidant, and his greatest source of emotional strength. Her intelligence, warmth, and unwavering belief in his talent profoundly influenced his work. He openly credited her as a vital inspiration behind some of his most iconic creations, including The Producers and Young Frankenstein. Behind the laughter, behind the audacity, there was love, and that love shaped everything. As Mel Brooks entered the final decades of his life, reflection came naturally. Age stripped away rivalry and replaced it with gratitude. He had seen comedy evolve, he had seen it survive, and he had lived long enough to understand what truly mattered. And that understanding would soon shape the most honest words he had ever spoken. At 99 years old, Mel Brooks reached a moment where reflection was no longer optional, it was inevitable. With nearly a century behind him, the legendary filmmaker no longer felt the need to soften his words or protect carefully crafted myths. Time had done something liberating. It removed ego, it erased rivalry, and it left only truth. So when Mel Brooks finally spoke about Rob Reiner, what emerged was not gossip, not grudges, and not revisionist history. What emerged was clarity and respect. He begins by acknowledging Rob Reiner not merely as a director or an actor, but as a cultural force shaped by comedy itself. Rob, Brooks explains, didn't just grow up around comedy, he breathed it. When your father is Carl Reiner, comedy isn't a profession, it's the air in the room. But Brooks is careful to emphasize that Rob Reiner inherited far more than a famous last name. He absorbed discipline, timing, and a moral seriousness about comedy as an art form. To Brooks, that seriousness is what separated Reiner from many of his contemporaries. Comedy, in Rob's hands, was never careless. It was intentional. Looking back, Brooks reflects on what impressed him most: Reiner's seamless transition from performer to director. A lot of funny people can make you laugh, Brooks says. Very few know how to listen to a story. Rob listened. Brooks explains that Reiner understood something essential. Comedy works best when it is grounded in truth and character, not just punchlines. Whether Reiner was directing comedies or dramas, his films treated audiences with intelligence and emotional respect. They trusted viewers to feel, not just react. Brooks also addresses a common misconception that their comedic styles were somehow opposed. People think I was all jokes and Rob was all heart, Brooks says. That's nonsense. I cared deeply about heart, and Rob had a wicked sense of humor. Their approaches were different, yes, but they came from the same instinct to tell stories that mattered. Comedy is just tragedy with good timing, Brooks says, and Rob Reiner understood that instinctively. As the conversation deepens, Brooks speaks candidly about ego in Hollywood and how rare it was to encounter someone like Reiner. Rob never needed to prove he was the smartest person in the room. According to Brooks, that quiet confidence was the mark of real leadership. He contrasts this with filmmakers who confuse control with vision. Reiner, he explains, led with trust. Trust in actors, trust in writers, trust in the material itself. That trust created safety, and safety, Brooks says, is where great work is born. Brooks also reflects on Reiner's moral compass, something he believes is often overlooked. Rob always knew where he stood, not politically, but humanly. He believed that films should ultimately affirm empathy and dignity, even when confronting darkness. That belief, Brooks suggests, is why Reiner's work endures. You don't leave his movies feeling smaller, Brooks says. You leave feeling understood. As his reflections near their end, Brooks's tone softens. Age has stripped away competition, leaving only gratitude. At 99, he says, you count blessings, not box office numbers. And Rob Reiner, Brooks admits, is one of those blessings. History may place their names in different chapters of comedy, but Brooks sees a shared legacy beneath it all. We both wanted the same thing, he concludes. To make people laugh, yes, but more importantly, to make them feel a little less alone. In the end, Mel Brooks' truth about Rob Reiner is not shocking. It is deeper than that. It is the truth of respect earned over decades, of talent recognized without jealousy, of friendship defined not by shared projects, but by shared values. From a man who has lived long enough to watch comedy evolve and survive, these words stand as a final, generous acknowledgement. One storyteller honoring another who truly understood what it meant to get it right.